Bon vespre a tothom i gràcies per acompanyar-nos en aquesta jornada inaugural del festival La Coma. Gràcies, Ingrid Guardiola, per aquest pròleg tan inspirador, revelador, il·luminador. Moltes vegades se diu que tots els pròlegs haurien de ser epílegs, perquè no haurien de condicionar tot allò que ve després, però estic molt feliç d'estar condicionat per aquesta prèvia. Crec que ens farà mirar en tots els sentits d'una manera diferent. M'agradaria començar donant gràcies a la Fundació Mallorca Literària per l'ambició, l'energia i l'excel·lent feina que han fet perquè aquest festival de pensament i literatura fos possible, a la Fundació Mallorca Literària i tot l'equip que la conforma, en el baluart per acollir aquest acte, aquests dies d'actes, i també en Alexandra Griffin, que ens acompanya des de la cabina d'interpretació i que farà possible que tots ens puguem entendre. Crec que també és important visibilitzar qui transporta paraules d'idioma a idioma. I sense més preàmbuls, per favor. Estàu fent el que estava a punt de demanar-vos, que és fer un immens aplaudiment per Jeanette Winterson.
Oh yeah, that's nice.
Parlar de Jeanette Winterson és parlar d'una autora britànica, una de les escriptores més reconegudes, llegides i aplaudides en l'àmbit global, en l'àmbit internacional, però també me permetreu dir que és parlar d'una persona que és molt fàcil estimar sense haver-la conegut. És una persona que escriu llibres que generen espais amables, d'amistat, de crítica, d'imaginació i que és un autèntic privilegi que ens acompanyi avui. Ella és autora d'una trentena de llibres, una quinzena dels quals són novel·les per adults. Evidentment no els repassaré tots, és molt més interessant sentir-la parlar a ella, però sí que m'agradaria destacar alguns títols, com Oranges are not the only fruit, de l'any 85, la novel·la fundacional amb un fort component autobiogràfic amb què se va donar a conèixer, La passió, del 1987, una fabulació que travessa Europa durant les guerres napoleòniques amb la passió, l'amistat i l'imaginació com a fil conductor. Escrit al cos, de 1992, una història de corporeïtat, desig i de vegades d'un amor que va molt acompanyat de la incomprensió. Per què ser feliç quan podria ser normal? Un llibre que a totes les persones que l'hem llegit crec que ens ha inspirat, ens ha emocionat i ens ha ajudat a crear aquest lligam d'amistat amb una persona que no coneixíem encara. La seva darrera novel·la, Frankenstein, del 2019, que explora com els cossos podem imaginar-nos altres, com ens podem alterar, com ens podem modificar, com ens podem de vegades fins i tot mutilar o expandir. I finalment, el darrer llibre que ha aparegut de l'autora Night Side of the River, l'any 2023, que són històries de fantasmes aparegudes al Sunday Times. Jeanette Winterson ha estat, com vos he dit, reconeguda internacionalment. El 2006 va ser nomenada oficial de l'Ordre de l'Imperi Britànic, poca broma, i el 2018 me sembla que va ser ascendida perquè va ser nomenada comandant de l'Ordre de l'Imperi Britànic pels seus serveis a la literatura, cosa que trob bellíssima. També ha estat reconeguda amb el premi de la Independent Bookshop Week dels Estats Units, el John Llewellyn Rhys Award i el Premi Lambda de literatura LGBTIQ+, en dues ocasions. Una cosa que m'interessa molt de l'obra de Jeanette Winterson és que sempre està en tensió. Està en tensió entre binomis que de vegades són contradictoris i de vegades van de bracet. Binomis com els de la llibertat i la felicitat, la norma i la transgressió d'aquesta norma, la individualitat i la comunitat o la imaginació i la fisicitat de la matèria, la corporeïtat. A més, tot això ho ha fet sovint parant especial atenció a les identitats sexuals i de gènere i creant un espai difícil de revolta, de revolució i alhora de tendresa, del qual me reconec amic. Aquest espai d'amistat, aquest espai de crítica, de pensament comú, és el que intentarem reproduir, generar avui en aquest aljub d'esbaluart, i per això ara sí m'agradaria donar la benvinguda a l'escenari a Jeanette Winterson.
Here we go. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Thank you. It's great to see you. Hello. Hello. I am very happy to be here with you on your beautiful island. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for coming into this dungeon when you could be in the sunshine. Well, we're here tonight to think about the body and this question of what is beyond the body. And I hope it's a conversation that we can all be involved in. And at present, as far as I can tell, there are only 3 ways of going beyond the body. And the first one, which is inevitable but I don't recommend, is to die. And then it's done. And at that moment, some of you may believe in God and an afterlife, some of you may not. But at that moment of death, some of you are going to say, oh shit. Because if there is an afterlife and you weren't expecting it, you're in trouble. And if there isn't and you were, you will be disappointed. But you know, humans have always worried about death because it is the final leaving of the body with all its difficulties and disruptions. And as long as humans have been able to think about it, we have worried about it. And you could think of religion as the world's first disruptive startup, because what religion is disrupting is death. Religion is there to say, no, the body is a temporary place. It's a lodging house. It's not your permanent home. And we are led to believe that there will be a world beyond this one, which will not be filled with difficulty and trouble, and that is somewhere that we can go. And this has always been the case. Wherever you look across cultures, people have wanted to believe that there is something that exists beyond the material self. And that is because it is very difficult for us as humans to accept that we are made of meat. I mean, it's just disappointing, isn't it? Here we are, think what we've done. We've been to the moon, and we are made of meat. And as hybrid creatures with a big brain and a puny body, it's both our arrogance and our bewilderment that leads us to think, how can this be all there is? How can this be the end of what we are? 80 years, 90 years, and then we're gone. It makes no sense. And into that bewilderment, that arrogance, that disbelief, comes religion to try and offer a different reality. And of course, as someone who was brought up in the church, in a very religious household, it really fascinates me now that after 400 years of the Enlightenment, the gradual separation of science and religion, that science and religion are now coming together and asking the same question. It's a very interesting question. Science and religion are both asking, is consciousness obliged to materiality? Do you need a body to be alive? Is consciousness obliged to materiality? And religion has always said, no, don't be stupid. When you die, your lovely soul will go somewhere else. And science has always said, don't be stupid. When you're dead, you're dead. You're going nowhere. And this has been parallel lines that could not meet in space because they were two completely opposing views of what would happen to us when we die. Now, you've got the strange thing that is happening with research in artificial intelligence is now this question of what is consciousness. And there has been a lot of talk among neuroscientists about consciousness being what we call an emergent property, something that simply arises out of being. You can't locate it, you can't pinpoint it, but it comes out of being human. And when we're not human anymore, it's gone. Well, it's looking like that might change, and that we are creating a future that we always believed existed. And as a writer, this fascinates me because I begin to wonder if we've been telling the story backwards, that we always knew we would get to a point where we might be able to not just extend biological life, but live alongside non-biological entities, which do not suffer the same fate as humans, who don't die, don't eat, don't sleep, don't reproduce in the same way that we do. And they will then be our companions until such time as we too could upload our consciousness, so we will become disembodied creatures. Exactly as religion has always said, that you don't need a body to be. You don't need a body to be a being. Here we are wondering now, is that true? Could that be true? Will that be the case? I'm wondering about it myself because, again, for all of history, all of culture, wherever you go, humans have been very comfortable with the idea of living among non-biological entities. We call them fairies, elves, demons, angels, little people, trolls, goblins, doesn't matter what. Wherever you go, you will find a level above the biological, above the material plane, where other beings are supposed to live. This is absolutely common. We are already primed for living with non-biological entities in our world. That's why it feels so easy to shout at Alexa and ask Siri what's going on. And there will only be more of that. Somewhere we know it. We really know it at a deep level, that everything is not concentrated on the physical body, that everything is not only about the biological self. I don't think we will find the transition to living alongside non-biological entities, which will be AI systems, whether robots or operating systems. I don't think we'll find that really so difficult. So as somebody who writes stories, who is always trying to invent worlds, this intrigues me, it interests me, it fascinates me, and above all, it doesn't frighten me. This need not be a dystopia. Because one thing you all know, because you're in this room tonight, I believe that you know it, is that life is made up of a series of narratives, of stories that we tell each other about who we are, how we live, how we want to live. And society changes as those stories change, as we replace one kind of story for another. So we're always living at that level of invention. So we bring our curiosity, our desire into our invention to recreate stories about who we are, who we might be, how we might live. This is how we know ourselves, how we reflect ourselves. But it's not enough simply to have a big brain in this world, because for now, we are in the body. Every experience is embodied. You cannot have a thought without a feeling. Humans are hybrids. We have a limbic system and we have a neural highway. The machines work on connected neural networks. They do not have a limbic system. So they're not us in that sense. They're not emotional as we are. But we are these hybrid creatures. So what do we do when religion doesn't work for us, and yet we find the absurdity of being trapped in the body difficult to manage? I think we do what we've also always done, as well as imagined a sky god and other creatures from other realms living among us. What else have we done? We started doing it the moment somebody came back from hunting woolly mammoths or fishing in the river and put a stick in the fire and drew a picture on the wall of the woolly mammoth, of the fish, of the antelope, of the animals. From that second, the moment that happens, life becomes symbolic. The moment that happens, we become more than creatures made of meat. We become more than bodies. We become more than predator and prey, or as Donald Trump would have it, winners and losers. The symbolic life begins, and we see ourselves and our world beyond ourselves. The moment somebody begins to say, the sun rises every day, who pushes it uphill? When somebody looks at the moon and says, who lives there? This then is not simply childish invention. It's a way of understanding ourselves as more than an animal. And that's our blessing and our curse, because we are shit shovelers and stargazers, people who do terrible damage and who create wonderful things. We are divided, hybrid creatures who feel, if not trapped in the body, caught in it, sometimes against our will. So what do? With the symbolic life, we find a way out, because art says, look, life has an inside as well as an outside. Not everything can be understood in the material world. Not everything can be satisfied by the material world. Not everything can be made out of just desire and wanting and money and power. Why do we still feel empty when we seem to have everything, and yet we feel like we have nothing? What do? Art is there to guide us from this outside world with all its seductions and beauties, and that we love and we enjoy and we relish. It's to guide us from this outside world into the inner world, where meaning becomes possible. And that's why I would say to you tonight, when we come along to something like this, that people might think, oh, you know, that's your time off work, maybe that's your hobby, maybe, you know, you're a middle-class person who likes to go to talks and concerts. It's a kind of luxury. It's not the main thing. If anybody tells you that, they're wrong. Right? Because if art is a luxury, then being human is a luxury. Because we've always done it, and we did it in conditions far more difficult than now, in circumstances that were not there to make it happen, and yet we did it. And where is there a child yet born on this planet that does not want to dance, that does not want to sing a little song, that does not want to bang on the kitchen table in a rhythm, that does not want to hear a story and say, tell it to me again, tell it to me again, that doesn't make up stories and little dramas and have imaginary friends? Where is there a child with no toys who won't make a kingdom out of pots and pans? That's the creativity, the non-material self that is hardwired into what it means to be human. We tell stories, we paint pictures, we make sculptures, we create theatre, installations, music. These are not biological necessities. You know, people talk about these things as having economic value. That's because they have to convince idiot politicians to go on supporting them. The real value is to us on the inside, to us as humans, to us who cannot find our meaning, our satisfaction, our endeavour, our purpose, just in the outside world alone. So we create symbolic structures, just as we began to do when somebody put that stick in the fire, when somebody said, who pushes the sun uphill every morning? When we began to invent ritual, rhythm, ways of managing the human condition. And when I look at the world now as it becomes cruder, more divided, more simplistic, looking for easy solutions, I think, for me, reading a book reading a poem, going to the theatre, looking at a painting, if I can get there without everyone with their smartphones trying to take a photo of it. But those things, they're like battery packs. You recharge yourself. You get your energy back. You keep your mind sharp. You keep your spirit focused. And you don't have to believe in God to know that there is such a thing as the spirit. You don't have to believe in heaven to know there is such a thing as the soul. We know what it means when we say, oh, he sold his soul, or she's got no soul, or this is a soulless place. We know what that means. It's not the material world. It's something else. It's more difficult to talk about, except that art always talks about it perfectly. And that's why we go on with it. That's why we still make it. That's why we still do it. That's why we say it is not a luxury item. It is essential to who we are. And so, if we want to move beyond the body before we drop dead, if we want to move beyond the body without disappearing into some ivory tower of the mind and trying to pretend that this body, this place here, doesn't matter, that we're only rational, we're only logical, we're only thoughts, which we're not. If we want to move beyond the body in a way which is creative, responsible, energetic, sustainable, continuous, life-enhancing, what do? We come here. We read books, we go to the theatre, we go and look at pictures, we support people who are trying to go on making that work. That continuity, okay? It's like a baton handed across time so that you're not floating on a little raft of isolation in the present, disconnected from history, frightened of the future. No, there is this rope, this continuity. It's made of light. And it goes right through from the beginning, when humans said, I will leave a record, I will tell you how I feel. And it's still there, because those parts of ourselves do not change. Who do I love? What if you betray me? What if there's a conflict between my country and my family? How do I find purpose? What is meaning? All of those things are examined through art in its various forms. And that is the light place, the shining place that we can go to whenever we want. And you don't need to be rich. You don't need money. You can do these things cheaply, quietly, but you must do them because you are part of the continuity, part of those people, who will carry on this thing that it means to be human. And if we are going to live alongside non-biological entities, my robot friends and co, we need to bring the best of us. And the best of us is art. Thank you. What are we talking about now?
We're talking from here.
Okay.
Moltes gràcies. Do you hear?
I can hear. Yes, Alexandra, I can hear you. Yeah.
Gràcies, Alexandra. He esmentat abans l'Alexandra Griffin, que és la intèrpret que ens està traduint avui, i m'he deixat d'esmentar dues persones importantíssimes, que són les dues persones que han traduït Jeanette Winterson al català, amb els títols que vos he esmentat. Dolors Udina ha traduït La Passió, Perquè ser feliç quan podria ser normal, i Frankenstein, i Belolit ha estat darreri traductori de Winterson al català amb Escrit al cos. Per tant, crec que és important esmentar també aquest tipus d'autoria.
Yeah, I think I would clap, but my earpiece will drop out.
No sé si ha estat un luxe, Jeanette, sentir-te parlar, però sí que ha estat un plaer immens, ha estat un gust. I m'agradaria estirar alguns fils que has desplegat. Parlaves de l'absurditat de viure atrapat, atrapada, atrapadi en un cos, i un aspecte que sempre m'ha impressionat molt de la teva obra, a més vista en conjunt, és el fet que molts personatges viuen en cossos absurdament marcats pels altres. De vegades són cossos considerats monstruosos, cossos no normatius, cossos discriminats o bandejats, però que al final viuen amb una gran dignitat i amb un gran orgull. Què implica parlar de la raresa quan parlam de cossos i quin significat, quines implicacions té això en un món com el contemporani en què l'observació i la relació que mantenim amb els altres, amb el cos, és tan important?
Don't see it as a challenge. See it as a completely normal part of the continuum of life. We're always trying to separate people, into us, them, what's normal, what's not. And the only hope, I think, for humanity on the planet now will be to stop separating us and them. Because there is no them. There's just us. We're humans on a small planet, and we're going to have to figure it out. And what you can do in literature is expand people's understanding of what life is in all its multiplicity, its complexity, its variety. We're losing variety in the natural world every single day. We're going to have to stick everything in zoos. We'll all be in zoos probably, because we'll just be protected species. But it's that diversity and the glory of the diversity in all its forms, physical, mental, the way we think, the way we understand, the way we live, who we are, which matters. And one of the great things really about the second half of the 20th century, until now where things are going backwards, is that we have heard many different voices in literature and in art, voices that were not heard before, because it used to be about straight white men and some gay white men, and nobody else. And now that's different. And that's been a wonderful thing with this inclusivity, which is now under threat, as you know, everywhere. There's attacks. It's attacks on diversity, on difference, and it's crude and it's basic. And we should not ever get involved with that. We have to stand up against it, fight it. And as I said to you at the end of my talk, you have to find ways of recharging your batteries, of being strong, of not being defeated. Don't put your brain in the sewer, and don't put your head in the trash. Don't live in all that shit. You can know it, you can be aware of it, but you also have to have good food that feeds you. We cannot be strong, capable citizens who understand what is important if we're always feeding on garbage. So don't do that. Stand up for what you believe in, and which is, I imagine, it's diversity, it's the life of the mind, it's cultural endeavor, it's finding ways to manage the problems of our planet, and find writers that you love, artists that you appreciate, music that you enjoy, and put the time and energy into those things, because it really makes a difference. Otherwise, you will starve to death.
Parles de diversitat en els cossos, no tant de cossos marcats o diferenciats, sinó diversos, i de complexitat. Jo crec que la literatura també pot ser definida com un art dels grisos, és un art no binari, és un art que s'escampa en tots els sentits. I aquests cossos que des d'una perspectiva tradicional o més conservadora són marcats a les teves obres, moltes vegades tenen una alta capacitat d'alteració. Són cossos que emmalalteixen i que se sotmeten a tractaments. Són cossos que decideixen passar per cirurgies vinculades al gènere, a la reassignació de gènere o a l'experimentació del gènere, o cossos fins i tot que són creats de bell nou en aquesta revisitació que vas fer amb Frankenstein, del monstre de Victor Frankenstein. Per tant, la literatura pot ser també una tecnologia d'alteració no tant del cos, sinó de la identitat de les persones?
Well, that depends what literature you read. The body is a provisional place. We know that our cells are changing constantly. We know what it is like to get older, even to become unrecognizable. We generally deal with age in terms of diminishment of physical capacity. But this question of change, continual change in the body, really should give us a clue to this provisional nature of the self, and we need not be afraid of it or of the way other people manage their bodies or of difference in the world. Very often, what we think of as normal is just a superficial situation. It's not normality at all, and these things need to be investigated further, I think. And again, in all legends, stories, cultures across the world, there's always been the idea of the shape-shifter, someone who does not need to be caught in a single body, but can alter their shape. And of course, this is what we're going to see very soon as AI continues, because AI doesn't have a body. There is no... If you are an artificial intelligence system, you don't have a body. You can have one, but you don't have one. And nor are you connected and confined to a single body. You could be both embodied, you could be a robot, and you could also have several operating systems working simultaneously, but they're all you. And this is part of the interest of what we're building now, because we're building systems that are not confined in time or place, so they can move around. In a way that we only ever see in stories about shamans or magicians, that you can pop out of one body in one place and enter other bodies in other places, as you wish to do. And of course, that has always been the promise of religion, that this body which you're carrying around now and wandering about in, that's going to disappear, but it's all right because you'll have some lovely, lovely self somewhere else, right? So it's even in the most conservative cultural places, and religion is the most conservative cultural place, there has always been this complete understanding that the body is provisional and subject to change and is not the final answer. And so I never understand why the right wing gets so upset, either about trans folks or about people who want to live differently in their bodies, people who don't accept the norm, because aren't we told, according to them and their sky god, that all of this is impermanent and transitory and will change in any case? So, literature is often there to remind us, not that we live in our minds, but that our sense of our bodies it's not permanent and it's not final. And that's why, of course, when you're creating, if I'm a woman, I don't have to write about women, I don't have to write about now. If I'm a man, I don't have to write about men. The great freedom that happens in creativity is to show that these things really are provisional. Your mind is absolutely free if you let it be. And your sense of embodiment is whatever you want to make it when you are creating something. You might be writing a play for different actors with different forms. You have to enter all of those forms. And you do with your characters when you write. Whoever you write about, you must enter that space and inhabit it fully. Otherwise, your work is superficial. And so we have this capacity, all of us, to not just to enter into other ideas and concepts, but to enter physically into other spaces. And that's what actors do. That's why great actors are great, because they are able to inhabit another self and transform themselves. And we've all seen it, and it feels like magic, but that is possible. And yeah, they're great at it, but it is also a clue to what is there for all of us, this capacity, if we would just allow it, to think, what is it like to be you, but to really be you? Can I get inside you? And if you cannot, you can't do creative work. But as everybody actually can do creative work, because we're born able to do it. Little kids are great about entering other spaces, physical spaces, other lives. We're the ones who shut them down. But it's there. And I think it is that's within us, which should be encouraged, recognized first, because it's real, and then encouraged. And I think that's why any kind of totalitarian states, whether they're on the right or the left, find art so difficult, because it's not just an intellectual challenge. It is that. But it's also a challenge to how we see ourselves as human. whether we are small, narrow, bounded, literal, specific, particular, or whether we are able to get out of that into something else, which isn't just kind of universal blather. It's about entering into other states.
Parles de transcendir, de travessar determinats espais. Abans feies referència a la biologia, ara també a la tecnologia, amb la intel·ligència artificial. I volia preguntar-te, Jeanette, per el diàleg que has establert al llarg de la teva trajectòria entre literatura i altres disciplines, com per exemple literatura i ciència, literatura i medicina, per exemple, escrit al cos, aquesta recerca de voler entendre la matèria, aquesta carn que som, a través de postulats, a través de normes, d'investigacions, i també aquesta última investigació a través de la intel·ligència artificial. Com va sorgir de tu aquest neguit, aquesta voluntat de fer que la literatura dialogés amb disciplines que avui no està en comú, que es posin en comú, precisament?
Well, I don't like separations. I prefer to see how things can come together. Look, the human mind it discriminates, it categorizes, it labels, and some of that is very useful. You know, it's how we understand the world. But ultimately, and it's not just the mystics and it's not just the religions that tell us this, ultimately we have to look for bigger patterns and connections. Because I think that's what art does. That's what it's about. It's about connections above all. How do we connect with things that seem alien to us or that seem difficult for us? How do we do that? You know, and we can do this imaginatively, so it matters. But you know, we live in a world now where we really cannot have the luxury of being ignorant and stupid. We have to educate ourselves about as much as we can, about the way the world works, about climate, about artificial intelligence, about big tech. Now, we need to know about this world. This isn't a shrug and walk away time to live in. This is a really difficult, challenging time. And all of us, I think, need to learn as much as we can about what is happening. And therefore, we speak from a position of knowledge and integrity. You know, we're not like all these people on podcasts who know absolute shit about everything. They know nothing. You know, that is despicable. So what we do need to learn, we do need to understand, we do need facts, we do need to know about history. You know, we need to do all of the things that Donald Trump hates. And we don't go there. We're not going to go there. We're not going to celebrate ignorance and stupidity. No. Human beings have powerful minds that need to be educated, that need to be trained. And of course, then, you can challenge the orthodoxies, whatever they are. You can take a different view. That's the whole point. We don't see things in the way that generations previous to us saw them. You know, but we learn from them, and then we take it forward, if we can. But you can't do that from a place of ignorance. You can only do it from a place of knowledge and understanding, so that there is genuine dialogue, so that people are not talking past each other, you know, all of the time, which I hate. And the reason I keep lobbying, evangelizing for, well, it's not my fault. I was brought up in a gospel tent. I have to save your soul. I have to. This is my job. You know, you have to remember that my mother, Mrs. Winterson, thank God she's dead, you have to remember. Look, I'm not the only person in this room who's glad a close relative is dead. My mother, the late Mrs. Winterson, wanted me to be a missionary. And she got what she wanted. You know, it's like, be careful what you wish for, Ma. It just went in a different direction. You know? And that's why she used to say, you know, when I was, you know, you've seen it in Why Be Happy, the devil led us to the wrong crib. which is great, really. I just think it's wonderful that Satan, given that he must be busy, could be bothered to go to Manchester in the 1960s. There was a lot going on in the 1960s. But no, Satan took time to go and deceive Mrs. Winterson. And, you know, I feel good about that. But, you know, my background is one which was vivid, colourful, particular. You know, my house there were all over the house things written and stuck on the wall, usually from the scriptures. You know, man shall not live by bread alone, which I believe. The kingdom of heaven is within you, which I believe. Think of God, not the dog, which isn't in the Bible. I tell you what else isn't in the Bible. There are no cats in the Bible.
Oh.
No, there aren't. There's all kinds of other animals, obviously donkeys, camels, hoopoes, rock badgers, things that you can't eat if you're Jewish, you know, tons of it. Lots of unclean food, things with cloven hooves, things that chew the cud and don't, cattle, clearly. No cats. I think it's because the Israelites came out of Egypt where they worship cats, so they probably had enough cats by then. So there are no cats in the Bible. Anyway, that was just a fun fact for you. It's the only thing you'll remember from tonight. You'll go home and you'll say, oh, was it any good? Do you know there's no cats in the Bible? Which brings me to humour, because we have to be able to laugh, don't we? We have to be able to make a joke of ourselves, our world. It's not about being cruel and mocking people. It's about just finding the humour in the most ridiculous and also frightening situations. And because physiologically, when you laugh, you can't be angry. No, and that is a great thing. Even if you're really furious with somebody and they do so, you suddenly laugh, it's over, isn't it? You know, if you're having a row with, you know, say your boyfriend, and suddenly you say your flies are undone, it's over. Anything that we do to break the moment will change our perspective. And so often we think, oh, for goodness sake, stop it, it's okay. And we realize that we're just people trying to get by, trying to get on. And humor is great at that, you know. It's what everybody loves to laugh, loves a comedian, loves a comedy show. Because just for a minute, we remember that we're all together, trying to manage in the same way, trying to put food on the table, raise the kids, get through the day, love the person you love, get away from the person you don't love. You know, all the same stuff.
M'agrada molt que precisament obris aquest espai de parlar d'història personal, perquè crec que és un component important també a la teva obra. Penso sobretot en la primera, en Oranges are not the only fruit, que has definit com una autoficció.
So sick of it, you know, so sick of it.
Abans d'hora, diguéssim.
Well, look, do you want to talk about something you did 40 years ago? It's mental. This is not I'm not being rude to you. It's like, people always come up to me and say, oh, tell me about it. And I'm going, dude, it's 40 years ago. I don't know. I think I was there, but I'm not sure.
Ho portam més cap en el present i parlam de per què ser feliç quan podria ser normal. Justament, Jeanette.
Oh, great, that's only, how many years ago? 15 or something. 14, yeah, I can manage that. 14. I can do that. Oh, no, it's terrible. You know, one day I hope this will all stop. But we're doing a musical now of Oranges. Or, you know, so there will be a musical version.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, ludicrously, in England, the Royal Shakespeare Company, the RSC, have the rights, and we're doing a musical. So let's see, maybe, you know, and then maybe I think, and maybe I just disappear, you know, and maybe I can then be like the Indian rope trick, you know, and I get to the top and I've gone. Maybe that's what will happen. But anyway, 40 years ago, yes. But you see, there's this business of your history, yourself, your life, and of course it's written on the body. Of course it is. Everything. The body doesn't forget. The body remembers. You know that. I mean, it's something we've really learned about trauma, isn't it? That the body keeps the score. The body has memories that are not accessible to the mind. And this has been useful knowledge, but also very frightening, that everything is stored here. And of course, it's one of the barriers to the big tech idea of uploading consciousness, because so much of us is stored in the body. So we won't come out the other side like you won't be in my laptop where I'll keep you exactly as you are now, because so much of the physical memory will be gone. It just won't be there. And that's quite an interesting idea as well, where memory is stored and how it is reactivated, you know. And obviously Proust knew all about that, because you can just eat some stupid biscuit and everything comes back. And we've all had those experiences, you know, where it's a piece of music or a scent or a moment, and something we've completely forgotten about is vivid. Where was that? Where did it go? And yet, there it is again. And I think one of the things that's been so useful about literature is that it absolutely understands that the way we recognize and interpret the past is always a creative act. It's not like going to a museum and there's the exhibit, and it will always be the exhibit, because that's what it is. It's fixed, it's stable, it doesn't change. That's not how we are. You know, everything about us is in motion, is in change, is in flux, all of the time. And that's why you can go to Christmas dinner with your sister, and if you have to, and you will have completely different experiences. And you might say, oh, wasn't it lovely? And she'll say, are you crazy? It was horrible. And you were both there. Or you might remember something with your siblings, with your friends. You were both there. The facts have not changed. But your experience of it, both at the time and later in memory, is very different. And it's not about false memories. It's not about unreliable witnesses. Again, when we read, we understand that this is all a way of trying to make a narrative that we can live with, trying to find a story that will just help you get through the day, get through the night, manage who you are. And right now, in a world that's, I mean, I think of it as lost in the literal. We are so fucking literal about everything. Like, are you a boy? Are you a girl? You know, think, oh, stop. It is so literal. And the whole purpose of art is not to get lost in the literal, but to be able to move past that, to recognize not just interpretations, different ideas, different experiences, but that all of this is all moving all of the time. You know that great thing that we learned through quantum physics, that you can have a wave and a particle is a wave and a particle simultaneously until somebody takes a measurement, and then it's either a wave or a particle, but not to itself. It's both. And it's because we are always taking measurements, which we need to do, because that's our discriminating mind, that we think we know something completely. It was this happened, this is me, this is you. And then we are devastated when there is huge change in our lives. We think, but I don't know you anymore. You're not the person I knew. Who are you? I don't recognize you. And what we're really seeing in ourselves and others is some huge change that has come up volcanically from beneath. It always starts inside and then it comes outside. And that's what we're looking at. That's what we're living with. And literature is really good at preparing you for that, for understanding that if you are a story, first of all, you can change the story. and that the story of others will change too. And it's not a betrayal. It's not a, even look, it might, but there are betrayals. But very often, it's because people's stories themselves are changing, because that's who we are. You know, the only reason I got out of my horrible life when I was a kid is because I used to go to the library all the time, because that's where I could be myself, and also where I could find other worlds. And I thought, great, not everybody lives in this horrible northern town, so I won't have to. So I'm reading away, and then I realized, and I remember it very clearly, if I could read myself as a fiction, as well as a fact, I could get out. And it was that understanding that I too was a narrative. But I had to be my narrative, not theirs. Not what my family thought, not what Mrs. Winterson thought, not what the church thought. They had their own stories about this kid they had adopted. And I was meant to fit into those stories, and I couldn't do it. And we've all felt that. You don't have to be adopted to know that you can't fit into the story that's already been written for you. And I thought, okay, look, there's all these books here. So I can find my way out by learning to invent for myself who it is that I am. And some of you will know that when I was a teenager, I used to hide books under my bed, because you could only have religious books in our house, which was a bit of a limit. So I used to hide books from my job on the market, get the money, buy books, hide them under the bed. So if you've got a single bed, standard size, you can fit 74 per layer paperbacks under the mattress, okay? You can try this at home, it's safe. So just take them off the shelf, put them under the mattress, it's all right. But make sure they're the same size, otherwise you'll be like this. Anyway, so this is what I did. And my bed was rising visibly. You know, like the story of the princess and the pea, and up I went. And my mother, Mrs. Winterson, who was suspicious by nature, noticed this. And she went around the house at night with a torch, you know, like in a Hitchcock movie. You know, kind of film noir all the time. We did have electricity, so she didn't have to go around with a torch at night, but she did. So it's all dark, and then there's this flashlight going about, like she's going to rob the place. Except she owns it and there's nothing to rob. So the torch is going around. So she came in and she realized that my bed was closer to the ceiling than to the floor. And she pulled a book out from the corner of the bed. And it was so bad because it was D.H. Lawrence, Women in Love. And she knew that Lawrence was a Satanist and a pornographer. And she then just began throwing all the books out of the window into the little backyard that were behind the house. And she threw them all out, and I fell off the bed. And then we had a stove with, I don't know what you call it here, paraffin or kerosene, that we had to keep warm, because we had coal fires and these little oil stoves. And she poured it all over the books and set them on fire. The whole lot. This auto-da-fe, this kind of Gotterdammerung in the dark. And they burned. And the next morning, I went out into the yard and I was poking about. It was early, and there were just bits of text with random sentences on them, and I put some of them in my pocket. And it didn't matter anymore to me at that point that there was continuity of narrative. I wasn't looking anymore for beginnings, middles, and ends. I was looking for words. That words would be clues. And with them, I could find my way out. So I had all these bits in my pocket and that I could take with me. And I realized two things. I realized that if my library was inside me, she couldn't find it. And she couldn't destroy it. So I started to memorize text and to kind of take books and gut them like fish to see what I could get inside me. What would, like talismans, things I could take, ideas, characters, language. so that I was building this up inside. But also, as I was standing in the yard looking at this disaster, I thought, fuck it, I can write my own. And that again, it turned something that should have been it was terrible, but she didn't win because there was another way of interpreting what had just happened. So it could become freedom. I can keep my private library inside me, and I can start to write for myself, to write myself, literally, out of this mess. And remember that the world being as it is, we all think we can go home now and have our books and it'll all be fine. But for many people, it's not fine, and they have to leave everything, and quickly. So I ask you to consider what you would take with you inside that you couldn't carry as a physical object if you had to flee in the night, if you had to go, if everything was taken away. What is inside you that would support you on that journey? What stories are there that you could tell others to soothe the child, to calm the adult, to calm yourself? What poetry is in there that you might be able to recite for self and others? What music, what songs, what images that were on the inside and that you carry forward with you? Because, especially in a world that is all about outsourcing now, and you realise, not here because you've got your own power, but certainly in the rest of Spain, suddenly everything had gone. So much for Kindle. If it's all on the outside, it can go. That is how fragile and vulnerable we really are. But it's also how strong we can be. In societies where there wasn't much and where people couldn't have access, there was always a strong cultural tradition where people did pass things on, their stories, their legends, their songs, their culture. And we have to do that too. It's right back where we came in at the middle. What could we take with us if everything else was taken away? And that was an early lesson for me, and one that I have carried with me. And it's why, for instance, I believe in reading out loud, in the power of poetry, of memorizing, of self-containing what would otherwise be in the power of others.
És meravellós.
Oh, listen, boys and girls, we won't be long now because I'm hungry, and also we all need a drink, don't we? I mean, let's get back to the body. This is it.
Efectivament, han de passar més coses. De fet, després d'una performance que farà aquí Andrea Cruz, Tales of the Body, que és una versió reduïda d'un espectacle que parla de la memòria del cos, dels paisatges humans i de les imatges que mos habiten, pujarem en el pati on podreu demanar signatures a les autores que han intervengut i on a més podrem brindar per la primera edició de la Coma amb vins de Binissalem, que crec que això també mos ajudarà a alimentar cos i ànima.
Thank you. Thank you.
I crec que tenim temps per una o dues preguntes molt ràpides, molt concises.
No, I don't think we do. I think we should just fuck off. She didn't translate that. I know she didn't. Alexandra Griffin, did you from... Oh, you didn't to me. I don't know. She's from Wales. You can't trust the Welsh. My mother always said so. She said, never trust the Welsh.
Si no, també ho podem fer així. Tothom que vulgui parlar amb Jeanette Winterson està convidat a anar en aquest espai de signatures quan pugem i a tenir aquest moment amb una copa de vi i amb una mica de menjar també.
Yeah, let's get out of here.
Jeanette,
okay,
moltes gràcies.
Thank you. We go. Thanks everybody. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.